Hello! Today we're going to talk about a pattern you might recognize all too well in your life, that constant feeling of having to explain yourself, justify every word, every action, every feeling. And yet no matter how hard you try, you're still attacked, criticized, or simply ignored. If you're watching this video, it's very likely you've experienced this. Maybe you're going through it right now. And I want you to know that it's not a coincidence. There's a pattern behind it, and today we're going to unravel that pattern together. Let's start with the basics. You ever wondered why you feel this constant need to explain yourself? Why it seems like your words are never enough? Why, no matter how clear and detailed your explanation is, the other person always finds something to criticize, question, or distort? This happens because you're likely dealing with a narcissistic person. And one of the cruelest traits of narcissism is exactly this. They create an environment where you feel like you constantly have to prove your worth. Your intentions, your version of the facts. They make you feel like you are the problem, that you're not clear enough, that you need to try harder. But here's the truth I want you to deeply understand. It's not about you. It was never about you. The issue isn't your ability to communicate. The issue is that you're trying to communicate with someone who has no genuine interest in understanding you. To understand why your explanations never work, we need to dive deep into how the narcissistic mind operates, exploring the complex layers of their psychological patterns and behaviors that make genuine communication an almost insurmountable challenge. A person with narcissistic traits exhibits fundamental characteristics that shape their interactions in a rigid and often bewildering way, creating barriers to authentic and productive dialogue. First, the constant need to be right is a cornerstone of narcissistic behavior. This trait goes beyond mere stubbornness or a desire to win an argument. It's a deeply rooted compulsion that permeates all interactions. For the narcissist, being right isn't just a preference, it's an existential need. Admitting a mistake, even in the face of clear and undeniable evidence, is perceived as a direct threat to their carefully crafted self-image. The narcissistic ego is, paradoxically, both grandiose and fragile. Any crack in this facade of perfection can trigger an internal crisis, leading them to cling even more tightly to their narrative, even if it means ignoring facts or distorting reality. This rigidity makes rational dialogue extremely difficult because any attempt to present a different perspective is interpreted as a personal attack, not an opportunity for learning or growth. Second, the lens through which a narcissist views the world is intensely self-centered. Everything from casual conversations to complex discussions is filtered through a perspective that places the self at the center. When you try to explain something, whether it's a feeling, an idea, or a critique, the narcissist isn't truly engaged in understanding your perspective. Instead, their mind is preoccupied with assessing how your words relate to them. They might be thinking, how does this make me look? Is this a disguised criticism? Or even, how can I use this to reinforce my superiority? This self-centeredness prevents active and empathetic listening, as their focus is always on protecting or promoting their own image rather than building a genuine connection. As a result, your explanations, no matter how clear or well-intentioned, often fall on deaf ears, reinterpreted or dismissed if they don't serve the narcissist's interests. Third, one of the most striking traits of the narcissistic mind is its almost supernatural ability to distort reality to suit its needs. This phenomenon, often referred to as gaslighting in more extreme cases, goes beyond simple conscious manipulation. Narcissists have an impressive capacity to rewrite events, conversations, and even intentions, creating a narrative that favors them. Your words can be taken out of context, reinterpreted, or completely reframed to align with the narcissist's view of themselves as infallible or a victim. For example, constructive criticism might be twisted into an accusation of disloyalty, or a neutral comment might be distorted to seem like a personal attack. What makes this particularly disorienting is that, in many cases, the narcissist isn't just manipulating intentionally. They often genuinely believe their distorted version of the facts. This sincere belief in their alternative narrative reinforces their resistance to any attempt at confrontation or clarification. As for them, reality is malleable and must bend to their need for validation. Moreover, the narcissistic mind operates with a rigid dichotomy. They see themselves as superior, while others are often perceived as inferior or potential threats. This polarized worldview makes it difficult to build relationships based on reciprocity and mutual respect. When you try to communicate, the narcissist may interpret your attempt as a competition or an effort to diminish them, even if that's not your intention. This defensive stance is fueled by an underlying insecurity that, though rarely admitted, is always present. The narcissist may project unshakable confidence, but this facade hides a vulnerability they protect at all costs, often at the expense of truth or human connection. Another critical aspect is the lack of genuine empathy. While narcissists can be extremely charismatic and even appear empathetic at strategic moments, this empathy is usually superficial, used as a tool to gain admiration or manipulate situations to their advantage. When you try to explain something involving your emotions or perspectives, the narcissist may feign interest, but their inability to truly connect with others' feelings limits their capacity to respond authentically. Instead of seeking to understand, they may redirect the conversation to themselves, minimize your concerns, or even blame you for feeling the way you do. Finally, the narcissistic mind is often marked by a constant need for external validation. They seek incessant admiration and recognition, and any interaction that doesn't feed this need may be perceived as irrelevant or hostile. This explains why your attempts at dialogue, especially those that challenge the narcissist's worldview, are often ignored or met with disdain. For the narcissist, communication isn't a means of mutual exchange, but an opportunity to reinforce their own grandiosity, to understand why you keep trying to explain yourself endlessly. It's essential to explore the deeper layers of your motivation and the psychological factors that keep you trapped in this pattern. The answer, though seemingly simple, is complex and multifaceted, rooted in both your human nature and the manipulative dynamics created by the other person. Let's analyze this in greater depths, unpacking the reasons why you persist in trying, even in the face of frustrating outcomes. First, it's important to recognize that you're a normal person with a worldview shaped by values and expectations, typical of healthy human interactions. Normal people operate on the premise that communication is a two-way street, a collaborative process where both parties are interested in achieving clarity and mutual understanding. You believe that by expressing yourself with patience, clarity, and care, the other person will eventually understand your perspective. This belief is underpinned by an intrinsic faith in people's good faith, an assumption that everyone at some level wants to resolve conflicts, overcome misunderstandings, and build bridges for harmonious coexistence. This mindset reflects an empathetic and optimistic approach where you invest time and emotional energy in the hope that your words can clarify, connect, and repair. However, this trust in reciprocity, while admirable, can become a trap when applied to someone who doesn't share those same values or intentions. You keep trying because you believe that with the right adjustment in words, more patience, or a more detailed explanation, the barrier will finally be overcome. This persistence is a reflection of your humanity, but also of a disconnect between your expectations and the reality of the dynamic you're in. The core issue lies in the fact that you're applying healthy communication logic to an abnormal situation. The person you're interacting with doesn't operate within the same parameters of open and honest dialogue that you value. Instead of seeking mutual understanding, they may be more interested in maintaining control, protecting their self-image, or manipulating the narrative for their own benefit. Your communication, tools, clarity, empathy, patience are designed to work in a context where both parties are willing to listen and respond in good faith. When those conditions don't exist, your efforts, no matter how well-intentioned, become ineffective, like trying to fit a puzzle piece into a space it wasn't designed for. This dissonance creates a frustrating cycle where you double down on your efforts, believing the problem lies in how you communicate rather than in the other person's refusal to engage authentically. Second, the other person's extraordinary ability to make you feel guilty is a powerful factor that perpetuates this cycle. Individuals with narcissistic or manipulative traits are often masters at flipping the dynamic of an interaction, making you the problem even when your intentions are genuine. They use subtle but effective tactics to undermine your confidence and make you question your own perception of reality. Phrases like "you're being too sensitive," "you're overreacting," or "you never understand anything" are carefully chosen verbal weapons designed to shift responsibility and put you on the defensive. These statements not only invalidate your feelings but also plant seeds of doubt about your own sanity or competence. Over time, this manipulation erodes your self-esteem, leading you to believe that the problem might actually lie with you. This induced guilt is incredibly effective because it appeals to your natural desire to be fair, understanding, and conciliatory. You find yourself trying to explain even more, hoping to correct the misunderstanding or prove you're not too sensitive or overreacting. This cycle of guilt and self-doubt is precisely what keeps you trapped, as the other person exploits your willingness to take responsibility to maintain control of the narrative. Moreover, your persistence in explaining yourself may also be driven by an unconscious desire for validation. Even if you don't realize it, part of you may be seeking acknowledgement that your emotions, or perspectives, or experiences are legitimate. When faced with someone who consistently devalues or distorts what you say, it's natural to feel an urge to keep trying, hoping that at some point your voice will be heard and respected. This desire for validation is human, but in a dysfunctional dynamic, it becomes a trap because the other person has no interest in offering that validation. On the contrary, they may benefit from keeping you in a state of uncertainty and constant effort. Finally, the cycle of trying to explain yourself may also be reinforced by a self-imposed sense of responsibility. As someone who values connection and conflict resolution, you may feel that giving up on explaining yourself would be akin to abandoning the possibility of improving the relationship or clarifying the situation. This reluctance to give up reflects your resilience, but can also keep you stuck in a dynamic that offers no room for mutual growth. Thus, you keep trying, driven by a combination of hope, guilt, and the desire to be understood, even when the evidence suggests your efforts won't yield the desired result. To truly understand what happens when you try to explain yourself to a narcissistic person, it's necessary to dissect the subtle and manipulative dynamics at play during these interactions. It's the act of explaining yourself, which to you may seem like a genuine effort to clarify or resolve a conflict, is perceived and used in an entirely different way by the narcissistic mind. Let's explore each aspect of this interaction in greater depth, highlighting how your attempts at communication are distorted and transformed into tools to reinforce the narcissist's control. First, it's critical to understand that when you explain yourself, the narcissistic person isn't genuinely listening with the intent to understand your perspective. Instead, they're actively filtering your words for vulnerabilities. For the narcissist, a conversation isn't a mutual exchange of ideas, but a battlefield where they seek to maintain superiority. While you speak, they're mentally cataloging any detail that could be exploited later, a potential contradiction, a word choice that could be misinterpreted, or even an emotion that reveals insecurity. This selective listening isn't aimed at building bridges, but at finding gaps that can be used to discredit you or reinforce their narrative. They're not interested in understanding your perspective. They're focused on how they can manipulate the conversation to maintain their position of power. This behavior is particularly frustrating because while you invest energy in trying to be clear and honest, the narcissist is simply waiting for an opportunity to turn the tables in their favor. Second, in the narcissistic mind, the mere act of you explaining yourself is interpreted as an implicit admission of guilt. To them, confident and innocent people don't feel the need to justify themselves. So your attempt to clarify something is seen as a sign of weakness or error. This distorted logic reflects their polarized worldview, where any attempt at dialogue is reinterpreted as a concession of defeat. No matter how well-reasoned or reasonable your explanation is, the fact that you're explaining yourself is enough for them to conclude you're on the defensive, which, in their mind, equates to being wrong. This skewed perception fuels the narcissistic narrative that they are superior and infallible, while you are to blame for any issues in the interaction. This dynamic creates a vicious cycle. The more you try to clarify, the more you reinforce their belief that you're admitting fault, even if that's far from the truth. Third, your explanations aren't just ignored or misinterpreted, they become ammunition for future use. Narcissists have a remarkable ability to store information, especially details that can be distorted or manipulated to serve their purposes. Every word you say, every detail you share, it's carefully tucked away in their arsenal to be used against you at an opportune moment. For instance, a sincere explanation about your feelings might be twisted in a future argument as evidence of your emotional instability. A casual comment might be taken out of context and turned into an accusation of disloyalty or bad intentions. This tactic is particularly disorienting because narcissists often present these distortions with such conviction that you may start to doubt your own memory or intentions. The impact is twofold. It undermines your confidence and ensures that any attempt at honest dialogue is risky, as your words can be weaponized at any time. Fourth, and perhaps most insidiously, the more you explain yourself, the more the narcissist perceives the power they hold over you. Every attempt to clarify, every effort to prove your point, is interpreted as a sign that they've succeeded in emotionally destabilizing you. To the narcissist, your willingness to keep explaining demonstrates that they control your reactions and can manipulate you into expending energy trying to please or convince them. They see this as a dance where you're led to move to their tune while they remain in control. This perception of power is incredibly gratifying for the narcissist, as it reinforces their need to dominate interactions and maintain superiority. The more you try, the more validated they feel in their ability to control you, creating a cycle where your explanations never achieve the desired outcome, but only strengthen the unequal dynamic. Moreover, this process of repeatedly explaining yourself can be exhausting for you, as it demands a constant investment of emotional and mental energy without offering resolution. The narcissist, on the other hand, thrives in this imbalance, as they're not emotionally invested in finding a solution but in maintaining control over the interaction. Every time you try to justify yourself, you inadvertently reinforce this dynamic, giving the narcissist more room to manipulate and distort. Thus, the act of explaining yourself, which for you is an attempt at connection and clarity, becomes, for the narcissist, an opportunity to consolidate their position of power and perpetuate the cycle of manipulation. How can you tell if you're in this pattern? There are some very clear signs. First, you find yourself rehearsing conversations. You spend time thinking about how you'll explain something, which words you'll use, how you'll defend yourself against potential attacks. You dedicate hours of your mental energy preparing for conversations that should be straightforward. Second, you feel exhausted after conversations with this person. No matter how prepared you were, you leave the interaction feeling drained, confused, and questioning your own sanity. Third, you never feel like anything is resolved. Even after detailed explanations, you walk away with the sense that nothing was clarified, that the issues remain, and that you'll have to go through it all again. Fourth, You find yourself apologizing for things you didn't do. Somehow, by the end of the conversation, you're saying sorry, even though you know you didn't do anything wrong. Living in this constant cycle of explanations and attacks has a profound impact on your mental health. Let's talk about this, because it's important to understand that what you're feeling is a normal response to an abnormal situation. First, it affects your self-esteem. When you constantly have to defend yourself, when your explanations are consistently rejected or distorted, you start to question whether you're truly valuable, whether your opinions matter, whether you're worthy of respect. Second, it affects your confidence in your own perception of reality. When someone constantly distorts your facts, denies your experiences, and presents alternative versions of events, you begin to doubt yourself. This is called gaslighting, and it's a form of psychological abuse. Third, it affects your ability to trust others. When you're constantly on the defensive, when your words are consistently used against you, you start to close off fear, vulnerability, and avoid deep connections. Fourth, it affects your energy and your ability to focus on other areas of your life. When you're constantly worried about the next confrontation, constantly trying to defend yourself, you don't have the mental energy to invest in healthy relationships, your goals, or your personal growth. Maybe you're wondering, why would someone do this? Why would someone deliberately create this kind of dynamic? The answer lies in the nature of narcissism. Narcissistic people have a constant need for control. They need to feel superior, powerful. And one of the most effective ways to achieve this is by keeping you on the defensive. When you're constantly explaining yourself, you're in an inferior position. You're begging for approval, acceptance, validation. They also have a need to avoid any responsibility. If they can make you feel guilty for everything, if they can make you take responsibility for all the relationships problems, then they never have to look at themselves, never have to change, never have to grow. And there's also the aspect of emotional feeding. Narcissistic people feed off others' emotions. They enjoy seeing you upset, confused, desperately trying to prove your point. It's as if your distress is fuel for them. Now, let's talk about what you can do. Because you don't have to live like this. You have options, you have power. Even if you don't feel that way right now, the first and most important thing is to recognize the pattern. When you understand that it's not about you, when you realize that your explanations will never be enough because the problem isn't your ability to communicate, you can start to change your approach. The second thing is to stop explaining yourself. I know this feels impossible at first. You'll feel the urge to defend yourself, to clarify, to prove your point. But you need to resist that urge. Every time you explain yourself, you're playing their game instead of explaining. You can use phrases like, "I understand that's how you see it. Your perspective is interesting," or "I'll think about it." You're not agreeing. You're not disagreeing. You're simply not engaging in their game. The third thing is to set clear boundaries. You need to decide what you will and won't accept. And you need to hold those boundaries even when it's hard, even when they try to make you feel guilty for having boundaries. Let's talk about specific strategies you can use in your daily life. First, the gray rock technique. This means being as boring as possible in your interactions. Short responses, no emotion, no unnecessary details. Yes, no, maybe. I'll think about it. When you remove emotion and drama from your interactions, you remove the fuel they need. Second, document everything. You have to keep interacting with this person for professional or family reasons. Keep records of conversations. This helps you maintain your sanity and have evidence when they try to distort reality. Third, seek support. You don't have to go through this alone. Talk to trusted friends, family, or a mental health professional. Having people who validate your experience is crucial for maintaining your sanity. Fourth, take care of your mental health. Practice self-care. Engage in activities that bring you joy. Invest in healthy relationships. You need to remind yourself who you are outside of this toxic dynamic. Sometimes the best solution is to walk away completely. This isn't always possible, especially if the person is a close family member or coworker. But sometimes it's the only option to preserve your mental health. Consider walking away. If the person never shows any capacity for self-reflection or change, you're experiencing symptoms of anxiety, depression, or other mental health issues. The relationship is negatively impacting other areas of your life. You feel constantly on edge. When you're around this person, remember, you're not obligated to maintain relationships that harm you. You have the right to prioritize your mental health and well-being. If you're leaving or have left a relationship like this, it's important to understand that healing is a process. You may feel confused, guilty, angry, sad. All of that is normal. First, you need to reconnect with your own truth. After years of explaining yourself and being questioned, you may have lost touch with your own perceptions and feelings. Take time to rediscover who you are, what you feel, what you believe. Second, you need to rebuild your self-esteem. Remind yourself of your qualities, your achievements, all the people who love and respect you. You are so much more than this person made you believe. Third, you need to learn to trust again. Not everyone is like this. There are people who will listen to you, respect you, validate you. But you need to be willing to open up gradually. Once you understand these patterns, you can better protect yourself in the future. Here are some red flags to watch for in new relationships. People who never take responsibility for their mistakes. People who constantly make you feel guilty. People who distort your words or deny conversations you've had. People who make you feel like you need to earn their love or respect. People who react disproportionately to criticism or boundaries. Trust your instincts. If something doesn't feel right, it probably isn't. As you navigate this process, be kind to yourself. You're not weak for finding yourself in this situation. You're not foolish for trying to explain yourself. You're human and humans. Believe in good faith, in communication, in the possibility of resolution. The fact that you're watching this video, seeking answers, trying to understand, shows your strength and courage. You're taking the first step to break this cycle. One of the most beautiful things that can happen after you leave a relationship like this is rediscovering what healthy relationships are like. In healthy relationships, you don't have to constantly explain yourself. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to walk on eggshells. In healthy relationships, you can disagree without being attacked. You can express your feelings without being invalidated. You can have needs without being called selfish. You can be yourself without fear, and that's what you deserve. No matter what this person made you believe, you deserve relationships where you're heard, respected, and loved for who you are. I want to leave you with a very important message. You're not alone. Millions of people have gone through this. You're not crazy. Your experience is valid. Your feelings are valid, and you have the power to change your situation. It won't be easy. Breaking these patterns, setting boundaries, possibly walking away from important people in your life. That is hard, but you're stronger than you think. You've survived this far and you can keep going. Remember, you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to accept being treated with disrespect. You have the right to be heard, respected, and loved. Your life can be different. Your relationships can be different. You can have peace, respect, and genuine love. It all starts with recognizing that you deserve better. If this video helped you in any way, if you recognized yourself in this situation, know that you've already taken the first step. Keep seeking help. Keep taking care of yourself. Keep believing that you deserve more. You're not alone on this journey. I believe in you, and I hope you start believing in yourself too. Until next time. And remember, you matter, your experience matters, and you deserve relationships that honor you.